Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. So this is going to be a video on analyzing work and designing jobs. So figuring out how to, what components, what duties, what tasks, what responsibilities should go into a job. So the first thing we'll talk about is workflow in organizations and workflow design. So you can think of workflow design as the process of analyzing tasks necessary for the production of a product or service. So, to get the input, produce the product, get it out the door, like what are all the things, what are all the steps that have to happen, and then how do you categorize those into individual jobs, if you will. So workflow analysis, we could think of these as really the inputs, the processes that you have to do, and then the outputs. So you can almost kind of read this bottom up, if you will. So think of inputs as the raw inputs, information, materials, people, knowledge, people skills and abilities, equipment, think like an assembly line, for example, all the things you need to carry out the work process. So those are your inputs. And then think about the work processes themselves as the activities the work unit's members have to engage in to produce a given output. So if we were making cars, think of like an assembly line, all those workers on the assembly line producing cars, everybody's doing a different job, um, pretty repetitively, albeit. And then output, of course, is the tangible or intangible products of any work unit. So, like in my previous example, we could think of the finished cars coming up, rolling off the production line and then going to probably to a storage for a bit and then to a dealership. So, workflow design and organization's structure. So, the organization structure brings together people who must collaborate to efficiently produce desired outputs, right? So, and companies have gotten better with that over the last couple of decades. Things like enterprise resource planning systems, kind of get everybody on the same page. Back in the day, it was kind of like the old adage that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, kind of thing. But companies have thankfully kind of gotten away from that. So different types of structures. It could be centralized, where sort of all the authority is in one place. Decentralized, the authority is spread out. It could be split into functional groups. Um, Departments would be an example of that, or it could be split into divisional groups. So let's talk a little bit about job analysis. So job analysis is more formally defined as the process of getting detailed information about jobs. This provides essential knowledge for staffing, training, performance appraisal, and many other human resources activities. So, of course, in their example, what role, like what are the jobs, tasks that comprise a firefighter, as you can see in their example. Um, so, careful job analysis makes it possible to define what a person in a certain position does and what qualifications are needed for the job. So, again, going back to the firefighter example, firefighters use specific equipment to extinguish fires, require physical strength to do their jobs, and must possess the ability to make decisions under pressure. So job descriptions, this is likely something you'll get when you get out into the world of work. You may already be in the world of work. Um, you should be given a formalized job description, which is a list of tasks, duties, and responsibilities that a particular job entails. So it's like imagine being handed like a piece of paper or being sent like a PDF. These are all the things that your job is responsible for. And then with respect to key components of a job description would of course be the job title, a brief description. Obviously, it's not going to be super lengthy, just going to give you some overview, right? Some surmise of what your job will be. List of essential duties with detailed specifications of tasks involved in carrying out each duty. And then the phrase and other duties as a lot of times they'll put that in the other duties as requested. Um, that's kind of like their way of saying, well, we may ask you to do other stuff that's outside this purview. So don't be surprised if we do that. And then job specifications. So a job spec is going to include really these three things: knowledge, skill, ability, and then any other characteristics. So knowledge, of course, the factual or procedural information necessary for successfully performing a task. Obviously, you got to know how to do the task. Skill, the individual's level of proficiency at performing a particular task, and that's going to vary by individual. The ability, general enduring capability an individual possesses. And then any other characteristics such as like job related licensing. So if you think, say, for accounting, a lot of people will have CPAs or CMAs. So that'd be an example of licensing and certifications. Even perhaps personality traits. Imagine if you were a counselor. Obviously, you're going to want to have certain personality traits. Sources of job information. So incumbents are defined as people who currently hold the position. Observers could also be people like supervisors, middle management. Objective measures are provided often by wearable devices. And then there may also be external job analysts who are sort of, looking at a job and determining, this is what this job should do. These are all the roles and responsibilities that should be within this job. Some will be broader than others. Some will just have more responsibility. And obviously that will kind of dictate and help be commensurate with, one would hope, with pay. All right, analyzing teamwork. So the first thing we'll talk about here is skill differentiation. So this speaks to the degree of specialized knowledge or functional capacities in a team. Authority differentiation is related to the allocation of decision-making authority among the team. And then temporal, or you could just say time stability, speaks to the length of time team members must work together. So what are the trends in job analysis? So the pace of change in jobs is certainly accelerating. Things like AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, applications of IT are becoming more widely available, which of course has an inevitable impact on job analysis. So job analysis must define jobs and detect changes in jobs over time. So thus it's got to balance the need for flexibility with the need for legal requirements and put greater emphasis on job design. So speaking of job design, what is that, you ask? So think of job design as defining how work is performed and which tasks are required. So job redesign involves changing an existing design. So maybe adding things to it, maybe taking some away, could just be giving that job more responsibility. And of course, effective design requires a thorough understanding of job through job analysis, and of course, workflow analysis, like where does that job fit into the overall workflow? So let's talk a little bit about designing efficient jobs. So industrial engineering may be a term you've heard before. So industrial engineering is used to reduce complexity in work. So it allows almost anyone to be trained quickly to easily perform the job. And we can use this for highly specialized and repetitive jobs. So this is kind of where you could say industrial engineering kind of comes into its own. And most organizations combine industrial engineering with other approaches to job design. So it's not like they just do industrial engineering. They'll have other, strategies and methodologies too, by which they'll implement job design. Now, this is important. Designing jobs that motivate, right? People want to look forward to going to work, right? To the extent that that can be possible. So workers with positive attitudes are motivated. The job characteristics model includes characteristics that boost motivation. So things like skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy. Autonomy is just sort of how much freedom you have. Nobody likes, somebody kind of breathing down their neck, if you will. And then, feedback. How often do you get feedback? How good is the feedback? So on and so forth. Now, sometimes a job will become prone to what's called job enlargements. And a good example of this is that hospitals have begun to enlarge patient access jobs to include financial counseling as well as coding and tracking insurance claims. So here they've actually added stuff to the job. Now, hopefully they will have also increased the pay. So designing jobs that motivate. So really two things we look at here. One is job enrichment, and then one is self-managing work teams. So let's talk for a minute about job enrichment. So this kind of speaks to empowering workers by adding more decision-making authority to jobs. Some people like that, some people don't like that. And of course, it's based on Herzberg's theory of motivation. And the idea is that individuals are motivated more by the intrinsic aspects of work. So maybe, putting more power in their hands could be a good thing, could help motivate them. With respect to self-managing work teams, these teams have the authority for an entire work process or segment. The team members motivated usually by autonomy, skill variety, and task identity. Now, of course, this is something a lot of people like is flexible work schedules. So one way to do that is called flex time, which allows full-time employees to choose starting and ending times within a set of guidelines. So, you can come in between 8 and 10, and you can leave between, say, 3 and 5. Another one is job sharing, which allows two or more part-time employees to carry out tasks associated with a single full-time job. And the compressed work weeks allow employees to work 40 hours within less than 5 days. So instead of say doing like 8 5s, 5 days, 8 hours a day, they might do say 4 days and 10 hours a day, Monday through Thursday, for example. And of course, remote work, also known as telecommuting, provides greater flexibility. So here we see some alternatives to the 8 to 5. Again, you've got the flex time. You can kind of come in, leave within reason when you want. You got the job sharing where, again, it says two part-time employees. It could actually be more. Two would make sense. Maybe they work 20 hours, but it could, in theory, be more than that. And then, of course, the compressed work week where, like, as I said, working 10 hours a day, it's like maybe Monday through Thursday, and then that way everybody gets a 3-day weekend. And then I want to talk a little bit about ergonomics. So designing ergonomic jobs. So firstly, let's define ergonomics. So ergonomics is the study of the interface between individuals' physiology. So think about kind of like your body and your health and physical characteristics of work environments. So the goal is to minimize physical strain of the worker by structuring physical work environment around the way the human body works. So this can lead to increased efficiency in the workplace. An increase in use of mobile devices are causing what they call you may have heard that term RSIs, repetitive stress injuries. So an example of ergonomics is maybe they give you a pad put under your thing, so like when you're typing, you don't end up um, having carpal tunnel, for example. Maybe some people like to stand up, so they have desks that will kind of move up and down while you work. Now, OSHA, I talked about OSHA briefly in another video. That's the Occupational Safety and Health Act. It really has a four-pronged strategy here. So the first one is they issue guidelines for specific industries. Some it's more of more of a big deal than others. Number two, they enforce violations of its requirement that employers have a general duty to protect workers from hazards, including ergonomic hazards. Number three, they work with the industry groups to advise employers in those industries. And then number four, there's a national advisory committee on ergonomics. So job design, this is the last thing I wanted to just kind of touch on. Also designing jobs that meet mental capabilities and limitations, because no one really talks about that. Maybe you could argue that's it's got partly to do, maybe tangentially to do with keeping people, like occupied at work, keeping them happy, they want to come to work. One of the problems here is that technology can cause information overload. So the goal is to simplify the mental demands of jobs in order to limit mistakes. So we want to limit the amount of information and memorization required to the extent possible. We want to make sure we provide things like adequate lighting, heat, cooling, stuff like that. We want to make sure we give as simple as possible instructions and easy to read gauges and displays, if it's in that kind of work context. And then we also may use software for tracking progress. So I just wanted to mention job design because everybody talks about it from the standpoint of like the physical, but no one ever talks about it really from the standpoint of the mental capabilities and limitations, and that's important too. Because at the end of the day, you want people to feel like they want to come to work. They'll be more motivated and they'll do better. All right, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.